I'll look out for the place.
Which is weird because I actually put on weight, so I know, which is weird. I mean, I lost weight actually December. I literally lost a few like those volume it's not working. I'm trying to just kind of settle back down in the middle. Pointy shoes.
Well, I went to there you go.
Times are hard.
You're on a blade something now.
I wouldn't be surprised if all
You can make any funny of these. We're playing together right at the Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're ready to go. So thanks again to Richard for the little interlude. If you'd like to get yourselves comfortable, I'll tell you a story.
Backpass and everything.
Oh, very good. I just went to work.
That's all right.
Okay, so what the songs I'm going to play tonight are relatively new, the last year or so anyway, most of them. And in that time, what's basically happened with my songwriting is that I stopped writing about myself because I was bored to tears with myself, really. So most of these are either story songs or they're portrait songs, or they're sort of little vignette type things. And each one has a little bit of a story. The first one we're going to start is a song called 1 to 10, and it's basically it was inspired by two friends of mine who, they're lovely people, but you know, they're infuriating, they're constantly miserable, they mess up everything about their own life, and it's so predictable. You just know exactly what they're going to do. Whatever's the worst decision, that's what they do. And people have told them, and it makes no difference at all. So it was meant to be a bit of a sort of piss take of them, but then I just thought, it's kind of what we all do, really. So it became a bit kinder in the end. So this is called 1 to 10. Well, he'd been round the block a few times and still he was never put off at the height of the hill. He'd set off at full tilt with his eyes on the mark, enjoying the thrill, the buzz and the spark. He said, "You think I'd see it coming, and I'd count 1 to 10 before telling all my friends I'm the happiest of men. I put all my eggs in one one bus getting there. Pretty soon I find I'm licking my wounds again. Pretty soon I find I'm licking my wounds again. Well, she learned not to clutter or fill up her space with the kind of stuff others leave all over the place. She had no time for boxes full of papers and rags. Her entire life fitted into Samsonite bags, she said. Whenever I find that I've come to depend on anybody else, I just count 1 to 10 before I break something I can never mend. And pretty soon I find I'm packing up again. Pretty soon I find I've packed my bags up again. So when life gets you down and drives you right round the bend, and you're trapped in a corner that you just can't defend, oh, before you do or don't do what all your friends recommend, just sit yourself down, look at it all again, and just accept that you'll probably make all the same mistakes again. If Joe suddenly topples over, it's all part of the act. Nothing to do with wine, no. You know what they say about cellists.
They say, actually.
That's what they say about it. Okay, next one's called Three Conversations, and that's exactly what it is. It's basically 3 conversations that I either overheard or was part of, and it probably needs a little bit of explanation. The first one is one of those weird, surreal conversations where you just overhear something and it sounds so utterly intriguing, but you really have no idea what they're talking about. But you just wish you were part of that conversation because it sounds great. The second one was something that happened to me in a little shop on the North Kent coast. And it was one of those incidents where you're in the middle of a very nice, chatty, sort of everyday conversation. Somebody confronts you with the most appalling bigotry, as if it's normal, and you're supposed to just sort of go, yes. And but you're completely unable to know what to do, really. And the third one's half made up. There is some truth in it. But so anyways, it's called Three Conversations. don't know quite what to make of the conversation I heard today. Two nurses sharing a cake in the hospital cafe, and one used a knife straight the way, and then leaning in to be discreet, she said, "It shouldn't be allowed." And her friend frowned and agreed, and said, "I don't think it is now." Old lady serving in the shop beside the railway line, where I often used to shop to buy myself some wine. She said, "It's changed round here. Doesn't feel like mine. And now there's all these fucking queers, and you can't tell half the time." Do you want a bag with that, dear? It's £5.99. From the stage one day, my eyes peeked out, face of the very one the songs were written about. He said, "They advertised your name, but the real reason that I came was that I still feel just the same." And I said, "I do too." And then he introduced his wife and walked away, and I came home to you. Yes. So I can get a bit more in here.
It's a story, yeah?
Is the, can you, does the balance sound right? Cello.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
Using the time.
Okay. Kingway did a sort of downbeat, down-tempo, upbeat song. It's downbeat and down-tempo, but it's got a happy ending. And it was as a result of a challenge, basically. The challenge was with a good friend of mine, the singer-songwriter Chris Osler, as we were on a little songwriting trip. We both stuck, both had no idea what to write about, really. So we thought we'd just give each other a ridiculous title and start from there. And it basically sort of turned out that we were going to just close our eyes, open them, and the first thing you see, that's the title of the other person's song. So I went first, and he got Jam Jar Label. And in about 10 minutes, he'd written an absolute piece of brilliance. So then it was my turn, and I got The Baby's Head. And I didn't know what to do until later on I got a phone call, and it was a phone call from an old, well, not that old.
Where were you?
Believe it or not, we were sitting in the gardens at Topsham Museum. There's some very funny looks from the old ladies going past. Anyway, I got the phone call from a friend of mine that I knew when I was living in the Middle East. I spent many years in the Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And this was a Syrian guy that I became good friends with. And he was, when I left there 3 years ago, he was really in a bad state because his family were trapped in Syria. They'd gone back for a holiday and they got trapped as sort of first of all government forces and then various other groups surrounded their village. And they were stuck there for ages and he was terrified what was going to happen to them. Anyway, he phoned me to just say he'd got them out, that he managed to smuggle some money in and they'd used it to bribe their way out past the guards. And they were safe in Lebanon. But I only found out most of that story later because I stopped listening after the first sort of thing he said, because he said, they're out. And I said, well, how did you do it? And he said, well, I made the arrangements through a government agent. And that was the first line of the song, so I stopped listening after that. So it's actually nothing to do with what happened to him. But I'm very proud of it because it's a song about the Syrian civil war with a happy ending. You try it. So, The Baby's Head. Through a government agent, and we told the kids that they could only take one of their toys, and we left after midnight, leaving the whole light on. Covered the baby's head so it wouldn't make too much noise. And we rode through the town, pushing the children's heads down and flinching at every sound of gunshot and grenade. Somehow we got to the border and the guard winked and said, "It's all in order here," and my wife covered the baby's head with her hand as they lifted the barricade. Now you try explaining to a 7-year-old girl that she's just witnessed the end of her world, or convince a 5-year-old boy that his mother's tears are not his fault. Try explaining to a 7-year-old girl that she's just witnessed the end of her world, or convince a 5-year-old boy that his mother's tears are not his fault. We drove through the mountains forests surrounding the old family farm, where they waited with their lips caught in their teeth. And at the sound of our engine, the old women came running out. They covered the baby's head with kisses and tears of relief. Thank you. That was cheerful, wasn't it? Next one is a bit more cheerful. I don't know if anybody knows Spain very well. Spanish travellers.
That's many years ago I lived
So
there.
Simon, did you ever come across the balnearios municipales?
Los balnearios municipales, no.
No? You know Paradors?
Yes.
Paradors are these luxury hotels built in historic buildings. So the balnearios municipales are like the D version of that. They're in second-rate, third-rate little stately homes and stuff in the countryside. And they're always cheap little hotels, quite nice little 2-star places, but they're attached to a hot spring, to a spa. But it's very municipal. It's very white tiled and mould. And they're really not much fun at all. They're run like prison camps. It's full of terrifying, starchy women with pulled back hair and buns shouting at you. For ordering you for one horrible treatment after another. The most terrifying being the parafangos. Which if I remember rightly, parafangos. It was my fault because they never called me parafangos. And I said, I want parafangos. Are you sure? And you saw all the other people going, my turn. They put you into this long tunnel, so it's about 20 meters long, completely white tiled, nothing in there. I mean, it really does look terrifying. You stand right at the end, and they turn a fire hose on you. And it's literally a fire hose with high pressure jet, and until you submit, until you're just like sort of crumpled on the floor, going, stop, and then I'll teach you dancing for parafangos. It's good for you. So, anyway, I was staying in one of those places, and the saving grace was that the friend I was with, we had a very nice table in the restaurant, and every day we were next to these two fantastic old ladies who fascinated us. And we made up stories about them, and things. They were very, very faded, elegant, and really quite fascinating, and obviously completely inseparable companions. Did everything together, and equally, obviously, utterly despised each other. And just couldn't stand the sound of the other one's voice. It was very funny to watch. So we made up characters for them. One was called Gracia, one was Margarita, but in English that became Grace and Margaret. So this is a song about them. It's called Comfortable Hatred. Okay. Comfortable hatred. For nearly 40 years now, these two old friends first followed, and then set, and then ignored the latest trends. One bears a grudge and thinks the other one should make amends. Comfortable hatred that neither wants to end. Comfortable hatred that neither wants to end. Tall and elegant Grace looks down on dumpy little Margaret, all made up like a clown, looking quite ridiculous now in that sparkly evening gown. She wears her displeasure in the flicker of a frown, revealing her feelings all in the flicker of a frown. Grace makes no attempt to hide what she thinks, as men a fraction of their age keep buying Margaret drinks, giggling like a city girl now as the champagne glasses clink. Margaret makes new friends, Grace just blinks. Margaret makes new friends, while Grace just blinks. And it never crosses Margaret's mind to rise to the constant provocation of Grace's tuts and sighs. There's steel in her heart, but only kindness in her eyes. Comfortable hatred, it's just part of marriage, she decides. Comfortable hatred, it's part of every marriage, she decides. Last one's on the terrace, 3 a.m. Both trying to keep straight faces as the manager complains. And then 3 pairs of eyebrows raised as Grace lets one off again. Margaret holds her aching sides. Grace just turns to try to hide the smile that's spreading behind her fan, while Margaret holds out her hand. And Grace takes it. And these two old friends help each other to stand.
Lovely.
Okay, there's a slight change of plan. I'm going to do a request. It was requested by two people who have no connection to each other. Sorry? Probably not. This is what I wrote when I first basically came to Exeter. I'll try to remember it. But I'd never really performed before. I've been writing and playing since but never done a lot of performing. And then when I came back, I decided I was old enough not to be scared of that sort of thing, so I did it. I decided going to open mics and things like that. And of course, found myself surrounded by 18-year-olds. Jenny Ireland. Who was then? You're older than that. Amazingly talented young people. And it was very refreshing and fantastic to get to know them and everything else. But there are times when you feel a bit of a fool. So it's sort of about that. So this is called My Turn. Some people sit on the end of their bed, writing songs that no one will hear. But they like to imagine a world in their head, with applause and acclaim and cheers. Some people wait till it's almost too late to stick their fat ass on the line. And some people hate to find out that they ain't quite as good as they thought all this time. Some people will sing any chance they get, always first with their hands in the air. Some need to be persuaded or begged, some have to be dragged by the hair. Well, me, I'm kind of in between. Sat on the sidelines for years. So you might think it's sad that I'm the same age as your dad, but it's my turn up here. Yes, me, I'm kind of in between. Sat on the sidelines for 25 years. And you might think it's sad, I'm even older older than your dad. But it's my turn up here. I start. You'll remember. Some of you might know Tobias Ben Jacob. Yes? Fantastic performer guitarist who, luckily for me, has got famous and we don't see him anymore. He's here on stage every weekend though, at the Globe. Catch that if you can. He was listening to one of my songs one day and he said, if you just put that string down another bit, you get really nice chords like that. So that's a Tobias Ben Jacob chord, which I thought was so lovely that I had to write a song with it. So this is called Buckles and Buttons, and it was really because Joe said once, why are all your songs about old women? I suddenly realised that they were.
They're the sexy one.
Don't know how to take that. So this is about men. Usual cliche, useless lumps of rubbish they are. But there's a bit more to them than some people say. It's been a hard night, it's been a hard fight, through a dark place, and in the daylight he tries a smile and reaches out to touch her face. He says he wants to turn back the pages to when things were still okay. He doesn't want to just burnish these cages that they're living in today. He says the thing is, I believe there's more to life than this. But his mask slips as she pushes his fingertips away. Gets up early and makes some coffee and then sits in the dark alone. These are the only moments he gets these days when his thoughts can be his own. He used to be so out there, self-confident, the center of the fun. But now he just sits and wonders where the man he was is gone. He says, don't get me wrong, love them all, but sometimes I think I'm on the brink and I'm only half waterfall. He follows the orders without question. He never watches the news. He says it's not for people like me to express my points of view. It doesn't mean that I don't have them, but just keep them safely tucked away. Because I find that I can sleep then without the dreams of what I do each day. And when things get really rough, I just polish my buckles and buttons up